Your entire way of life, our world as we know it, will completely stop without credit. And credit is based on confidence. And with what's coming and what's going to happen with, derivative contracts in the, couple quadrillion breaking, there's not going to be anything left standing except for gold and silver as money.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for August 13th through August 19th, 2024, while supplies last. First, we feature the famous 1-ounce gold Krugerrand at just $60 over spot. Next, we have the favorite bullion coin of Europe, backdated silver Philharmonics at just $3.10 over spot. And finally, we have 1-ounce platinum Canadian maples at only $80 over spot, one of the lowest premiums on platinum we've seen in a long time. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We're always delighted to have this widely followed returning guest. Bill Holter, an analyst of all financial markets and a former Wall Street brokerage manager, joins us this Monday, August 12th, 2024. Bill, thanks for coming back on Liberty and Finance.
Thanks for having me back on again.
We've got a boatload of viewers' questions. We'd like to get to a few of those after we touch on a topic that's been in everyone's mind this past week. We saw a significant market meltdown, not just in the U.S., but globally across multiple markets. And the press that came out about that said it was the triggering event. Sometimes people look for what was the catalyst for this particular conniption, which otherwise might have just looked like a significant market correction in the middle of a huge melt up in the bubble of everything. But actually there seems to be more under the cover than maybe we're being told. The smoke and the fire was supposedly the unwinding of the Japanese yen carry trade, which was people making profits off of borrowing cheap yen and investing them elsewhere for expensive or higher yielding U.S. treasuries, etc. And the unwinding of that when the Bank of Japan reversed course caused ripples throughout the financial world. And one of the observations you have made is that just showed a glimpse of how the implications of the derivatives complex built on the top of everything, this has house of cards, can magnify almost unimaginably the effects of what could otherwise seem like a routine event. Do you want to bring us into your latest thinking on what happened last week that triggered this apparent global market meltdown and what it gave us a glimpse of?
Yeah, I gave nuts and bolts of what happened. Was the Bank of Japan raised interest rates 0.15%. And that was the first time they've raised rates, I think, in roughly 20 years. They say it's a $20 trillion market. And if that's what's on the books, it's a multiple of that. It might be double. It could be 5 times. It could be 10 times. This could be a $200 trillion carry trade. What happened was the yen started to strengthen, and that created a panic to buy back yen and sell the dollar positions. I've read where I think I read in Zero Hedge where someone was saying that they covered 75% of that outstanding trade in those 3 days and last week. And I call absolute bullshit on that because it took 30 years. This has been going on for 30 years. It took 30 years to put that position together. And they're saying it unwound almost all of it in 3 days. Absolutely not even a possibility. One thing I've noticed this year is there's very, very few people even mentioning derivatives. And derivatives were the problem in 2008. They are the problem now. You're talking about a $2 quadrillion market. All the assets in the world add up to barely half of that. So it's truly the case of the tail synthetically wagging the actual dog. And I would just say that what you saw that Thursday, Friday, and the following Monday is a precursor of what's to come. It basically opened up the door to the system completely being margin called. And that's what we're going to face over the next few months, is a giant margin call that cannot be met.
For those who haven't lived through margin calls before, you might want to spell that out for what the implications are on the part of ordinary investors who think that they own what's in their brokerage accounts and think that they make the decisions on when things need to be bought and sold. One of the things that was an eye-opener for me back around 2007 timeframe was that there's fine print on the brokerage account that says, unless you opt out of being in a margin account where your stock shares are held on margin and that they're available for trade, unless you say no, I want these in my cash account. And you've even taken that farther, and that's what some of the viewers' questions are, is about retaining your actual physical stock certificates. But short of that, most people who think that they own stock shares in their brokerage account think that those are held and that they are going to make all the decisions about when those are sold. Can you, as formerly a manager of a stock trading office, can you bring us up to date on what the truth is as far as who's going to get to make the decisions about whether your things get sold if they're held in a margin account?
Well, first off, a margin account, what that does, it allows the brokerage house to lend your securities. So you put stocks in today, and by tomorrow morning, they're already lent out. You have to ask yourself, how is it possible that these major Wall Street firms have huge office buildings? They fly around in private jets. They go everywhere in limos. Where did that money come from? Well, it didn't come from the $7.95 that they charge you for whether it's a $10,000, $100,000, million, or $10 million trade. It's a flat fee of $7.95. There's no way they're making money on that. The way they're making money is by lending your securities out. So if you have a margin call, or if you have a margin account, that's a huge mistake, because your shares are not even in that account the day after you deposit them. Even a cash account, holding in a cash account, you will be bailed in. Again, watch The Great Taking. I just posted it again on my site. I think it was Saturday or maybe yesterday. Spend the hour to watch that, because all of your assets, when this thing busts, all of your assets are going to be taken over by whoever the institution is to save their own bacon, not you. And just to illustrate, so let's say that you got to put 50% up to buy. 50% is your money, 50% is margin. So you got $100 stock, you put up $50, and they lend you $50. And the stock, instead of going up, if it goes up to 15, you doubled your money, because you only got 5 in it. If it drops from 10 or from 10 to 5, you've lost all your money. And you're required to keep, I believe it's 30% margin. It might be higher. I don't know where the numbers are now, but when I was a broker, you had to have at least 30% margin. And if you dipped below that, then you would get a margin call. So if the stock went from 10 to $7.99, you had a margin call from $8 down, because your margin, what you put up, was not sufficient to cover it. It's a double-edged sword. It's great when prices go up, and it's disastrous when prices go down, because when you get a margin call and you can't meet it, your firm is going to dump it on the market and get whatever price they can, because they're protecting themselves. They lent you money. They're protecting their loan. So you have absolutely no choice, no say whatsoever as to how your position gets sold. It will just get dumped, and you're not going to get the best price. You're going to get knocked out of your position and at a bad price.
One thing that to point out there is the banks and the brokerages always take care of their own. We saw during the COVID crisis that the Fed FDIC that has removed reserve requirements for banks. Instead of having like a 10-to-1 maximum leverage ratio for their fractional reserve banking, they removed that requirement, so that banks could basically were unlimited in how much they could, how many times they could replicate deposits into loans. So it's kind of like a margin requirement for banks being just removed in times of crisis. We've seen the exact opposite happen. So this is both during the dot-com collapse and during the 2008 collapse, the Lehman Brothers collapse, is that, as you say, whatever your margin requirement was of your brokerage company, they can change that on a moment's notice. They can say, because of increased volatility in the markets, for the stability and security of all of our clients and the firm, now your margin requirement has been increased. And suddenly you can be in a margin default, even a margin call, even though your stock didn't even go down, but it's just because of general market volatility, they can raise your margin requirements.
Yeah, and I would just add that was very, very convenient that they got rid of the reserve requirement during COVID, because COVID was really about the credit stress. There was credit stress in September, October of 2019 because the repo market went from, I think it was roughly 1% overnight rates, went to 10% overnight rates. So what they had to do was they had to reduce the amount of borrowing, the demand for borrowing. And how's the best way to do that? Shut everybody in home and shut business down. There's less demand for credit, and that gave them breathing room on the demand side for credit. And then on the supply side for credit, what did they do? They took the reserve requirements completely off and allowed banks to lend any and all amounts they wanted to, and they were backstopped by the Federal Reserve. Fast forward to where we are now, interest rates have gone up. The positions that the Fed itself sits on have deteriorated so much that they have a negative equity position. They are technically insolvent, as is the European Central Bank, the Bank of Japan. I mean, you've got literally sovereign treasuries and the central banks. They're all broke and insolvent.
Now, you mentioned in passing earlier the margin requirement may be changed by and the margin clerk at your brokerage may automatically sell your shares if they're held in margin. A lot of people don't even know that their stocks are held in margin accounts. Is that something you recommend that people do besides, as you've told us many times, protect whatever you don't want to lose into physical assets like precious metals? But in addition to that, or short of getting the actual stock certificates mailed out, should people have all of their shares moved into cash accounts rather than margin accounts?
I mean, that's one thing that you can do, but you're still not going to be safe, because if your firm goes down, those stocks are not in your name. Even in a cash account, those stocks are in the name of your broker. They're on your broker's balance sheet. So when they go down, they're going to bail your shares in, just as a bank is going to bail your account in. They're going to take your stuff to save their ass. That's
a question that also has been asked by a viewer on this in ahead of this article, this interview, is should people go through the actual work of asking for their shares to be sent to them by their brokerage firm? Or you've tried that, and is it really doable? Is it something the ordinary person can accomplish?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't do it, you should have your brain examined, because think about a stock certificate as the same thing as the title to a car or a truck, or the deed to a house. It's proof of your ownership. When the system goes down, your shares, your stock may go down, it may go up, who knows? But when the system goes down and all these get bailed in, unless somebody comes to your house and steals your certificate, you have it. You have proof of ownership. And you're going to be able to present that at a later date and say, these are my shares. I'd like to sell them or do whatever you want with them. I'm going to go over this on how to do it, because I get bombarded after I talk about this with, well, should I do this? Should I do that? How do I do it? I'm going to tell you how to do it now, please don't email me because I'm not going to respond, because I'd have to respond, 50 or 100 times after every interview. So what you do is you tell your broker that you want your shares to be sent to the transfer agent under DRS, that stands for direct registration. And what happens is the shares are no longer electronically held at your broker. They're electronically held at the transfer agent. There's no fee to do that. If you tell your broker outright, I just want you to send me the certificate, they'll probably push back because, again, your shares are already lent out, and they realize you're going to have to go get those shares in order to give you your shares back. So, and they'll charge you $500 to do it, and it'll take forever and ever to get done. So tell your broker you want to transfer your shares to the transfer agent. That should take 2 or 3 days to get done. Once it's electronically held at the transfer agent, and you're going to have to call your company, whatever stock the company that you own, you need to call the company and ask them, who is your transfer agent? So once it gets transferred, you call that transfer agent directly and you tell them, I have X amount of shares of XYZ stock that you're now holding. They just arrived a couple days ago. I would like a certificate. And what they'll do, there is paperwork. They will have you fill out the paperwork that needs to be filled out. And generally, you're talking, I don't know, now it's probably up to $25 to get a certificate. But they will physically send you a stock certificate. Your shares will no longer be at the broker. Your shares will no longer be at the transfer agent. The shares will be in your hands. Don't lose your shares. And I actually did lose a few shares when my house burned down back in 2011. I got the majority of them out. There were a few straggling shares. But whatever, if you lose them, they got stolen, they got burned up or whatever, you're going to have to pay a 3 to 4% surety bond fee to get those replaced. And that's a nightmare. But the move from your broker holding your stock, moving it to the transfer agent under DRS, and then having the certificate sent out to you should take no more than 2 or 3 weeks time to do. It still can be done. Your broker will make it more difficult because your broker will say, what are you, crazy? Nobody does that. Well, you got to protect yourself. Nobody's going to protect you. And the reason they're giving you pushback is they've already lent your shares out. That's why.
So a lot of people are not aware that the strain that caused the 3 major bank failures last year still remain in the banking system, and in some ways are going to continue to get worse as long as interest rates remain high and their toxic bond portfolio and toxic corporate loans remain on their books. Do you have any words to update us on your assessment of risks in the banking system, as well as you just highlighted derivatives exposure and margin risk that can affect and non-holding of shares that can affect your brokerage accounts? What about the banking system?
Well, yeah, from an asset side, we live in fairy tale land. If you bought a house 5 years ago for $250,000 and now it's 500,000, 600,000, 700,000, do you really believe that's on solid footing? And there's people, that have bought houses over the last year, 2 years. Last year, the year before, what did you hear about? You heard about bidding wars. Somebody offering a house for $500,000 and it ultimately was bid up to $625,000 within 2 days of coming on the market. It was a bubble. It's going to pop. And as the economy deepens into a recession, you're going to see more layoffs. You're already seeing layoffs. You're going to see people that cannot pay their mortgages. Houses are going to go into foreclosure, and the bidding in foreclosure, are simply fractions of what the current prices. I'm not going to say values, but what the current prices are. And that $500,000 house 5 years ago, it's probably going to change hands at $300,000 or $400,000 at foreclosure. So it wipes out all equity because most people don't put down more than 10%, some put down 20%, but all of that is going to be chewed up. Somebody has got to eat those losses. And the banks hold some of the mortgages. The mortgages are held by pensions. Pensions are going to eat the losses. And I'm just talking about housing now. Look at commercial real estate. Look at high-rise office buildings. Look at hotels. I mean, there was, and I can't remember where it was. I posted it about 2 weeks ago. There was an office building, and I believe it was in New York City, that actually just changed hands at about 6% of what it traded at in 2006. And the losses were about $200 million. Somebody eats that. That doesn't just get swept under a rug, and it's somebody's balance sheet is ultimately going to reflect that $200 million loss. And you're talking about, call it $1 trillion market just in commercial alone. So where we stood a year ago or 15 months ago when those banks went under, I mean, we're on much less solid ground. I mean, the whole system is literally trying to stand in quicksand. And then we can add one more thing we can add a lot to it. You can add the fact that we have an election in November, and if it looks like the powers that are in place now are not going to be able to cheat enough to stay in power, there will be a false flag. Markets will outright close. The other thing between now and the election is the huge BRICS meeting in the middle of October. And basically what that is the world telling the United States and the US dollar to piss off. We don't want to play in your sandbox anymore because you're bullies, you're liars, you're cheaters, and a contract means nothing because you do whatever you're going to do. I mean, look at what's happened with Russia. We've confiscated $300 billion, and we're already borrowing small portions of that to fund Ukraine. So I guess to circle back, the fact that the U.S. now is on books 130% debt to GDP, and our judicial system is broken, we are, as the reserve currency of the world, we are the definition of a banana republic.
In the face of that, a number of people who still believe that they have a secure retirement plan based on the old rules of the game, their beliefs about how the system was supposed to work, the belief about what they really feel that they own, their deposits in the bank, their deposits in brokerage accounts, their equity in insurance plans or pension plans. You just talked about pension plans a few minutes ago, said pension plans are going to get hurt by real estate valuations, etc. We have a question here from Michael Bell 362, says, Bill, I'm retired at 48 and living very comfortably, mainly off dividends from solid companies. But what should I do? He goes on to talk about concern about risk that his future, what he considers a comfortable retirement, is based on what you, I believe, call quicksand, which is that the whole system will continue to function as it has functioned for the past 40 years.
Well, first off, I have no idea what this gentleman owns or doesn't own, but I would ask, what's your definition of a stable company? I mean, a stable company to me is something that extracts from the ground, grows something, makes something that's indispensable to human life. If you're going to tell me that, NVIDIA or, just go on down the list of all of the seven, the seven stocks.
The Magnificent Seven tech companies, yeah.
Magnificent Seven. Are any of those companies, do you consider them stable? I don't. The valuations are crazy, and I think the world could probably turn and function. I mean, some things would change, but I don't think people would die if NVIDIA went out of business, or maybe some people would die if Amazon went out of business because You point and click and boom, the stuff shows up at your door the next day. So I would have to ask first, what is your definition of a stable company? I would also say, okay, so your retirement is secure now on the dividends you're getting. What happens if not if, but when we go into a severe depression, those dividends get cut and we've got massive inflation at the same time, and puts you at a point where versus what you're buying right now, you're getting, say, 25 cents on the necessary dollar to live. So I would say don't be smug. To me, stability is having your money in either gold or silver, because it cannot go bankrupt, and you can always sell portions of your gold and silver to live on. I mean, if you go back to the year 2020, gold has risen, 9.7 or 9.9% per year. If since 2020 you sold 5% of your gold along the way to live on, you'd still have a bunch of gold left. And you'd have more in dollars today than you would have had back in 2020, because gold has gone up faster than you're taking out 5%. And I personally use silver as a bank account. I vault it. I mean, if I get a big check or whatever, I buy silver. Whether it goes up or down or goes sideways or whatever, I don't care. If I need a chunk of money, I'll liquidate it. But I know that I cannot wake up tomorrow morning and my metal's gone. It's bankrupt, because you can't go bankrupt. Gold and silver are wealth. Gold and silver are money themselves.
That's one of the things that's dawned on me surprisingly late in life, is how important it is to own real things like precious metals that are going to withstand the test of time and not be erased the way the dollar is being erased. That you simply cannot base your retirement or financial future, your children or grandchildren's financial future on fiat currency, because it's going down the drain. There's a question here from Sherry J9B, who asks, could you please walk us through step by step how we would take our physical gold and silver and purchase real estate or other tangible assets when SHTF? And how will we know? Well, that's one question. Let's just stop with that. Any thoughts from you on logistically how to make practical use of, you mentioned with systems working the way they do today, yeah, you can hold it in a vault and liquidate it at will and turn it back into cash and away you go. What about in a scenario where the financial system is not functioning as it does today?
Well, I would, I guess, start to answer that question by asking the question, if the system down, what is it exactly that you're going to buy? I mean, are you going to go to your local grocery store or Walmart or the gas station, or you think you're going to go out to a Friday night dinner? Good luck. Everything's going to be closed. There won't be anything. I mean, think about when a hurricane comes. Your grocery store is wiped out in 3 days because there's not little elves in the back room baking loaves of bread and canning baked beans for you. So they're going to be empty. The whole idea behind gold is it transfers your wealth from the current system into the next system. And because everything's going to be reset, you're going to end up having relatively more capital in purchasing power terms. I mean, you can go out and you can cut a deal with somebody. I'll give you 100 ounces of gold for your house. And I mean, it can be done. You can do that today, but you're doing it on a one-to-one basis. It's not like you're going to be able to walk into a grocery store, with junk silver and use it, but you sure as hell are going to be able to go to a farmer, assuming you live rural. If you live in a city, well, good luck to you. There is no hope. If you live in a city, you're going to perish when this goes down. But if you're living rural and you can find a farmer that's got eggs or pigs or cows or whatever, they will accept junk silver. I mean, I've gone to plenty of farmers markets, talked to farmers, and asked them, when things go bad, will you accept junk silver? And 9 out of 10 will say, I'd rather take junk silver right now.
Yeah, I had the same result at a local farmer's market. Went there and asked if they would take silver, and some look at you like you have two heads. They have no idea what you're talking about, and some get very sparkly eyed and they look around and they say, "Yeah, sure, happy to take silver." So you find those who are awake and go from there.
Yeah, well, another thing I was going to mention, because, I like to, I guess you could say, poll or query people when I'm out in public. And I've spoken to well more than a dozen different, whether it be local cops or state cops, and I've asked them all, when this thing goes bad, are you still going to work? And pretty much most of them laugh at me and said, hell no, I'm going to be at home protecting me and mine. So dialing 911, you're going to be lucky if somebody even answers it. I mean, in a system down scenario, it's going to be every man for himself.
Do you see a practical way you mentioned small purchases like food from a farmer, that sort of thing. What about larger strategic purchases for property, such as farmland or homes or something like that?
Sure. If that property is free and clear and they have a title, a deed to it, you give them X amount of gold or silver or whatever, and they sign the title over to you. It's now yours, and the gold is now theirs. You do the same thing with a vehicle. Now, if there's debt involved, if there's a mortgage or still a loan on the car or whatever, you've got to have a system that's up to be able to release the debt. So it's not true. It won't truly be yours until the system does reboot and they can write the debt off as paid.
In terms of what forms of precious metals are best for people to stack ahead of a system disruption, there's a number of questions. I'll focus on two of these. Devon5428 says, do you see any benefits to stacking only constitutional silver? Related question from Cleta Smith. What do you consider the best way to purchase gold bullion, such as the American Eagle or Canadian Maple Leaf, or pre-33 American gold coins? So constitutional silver and gold.
If I'm speaking to Canadians, I would say buy gold maple leafs. And if you can find Canadian junk, which is very, very hard to find, you would want that. Your next best would be Canadian maple leafs. As an American, you want the coin of the realm. You want gold eagles or pre-1933 gold. And in silver, as it stands right now, for what possible reason would you buy any other form of silver right now? Because junk is basically the same price as bars or generic coin or whatever. A year ago, there was a $10 premium. So the premiums have evaporated. You're buying silver in basically its cheapest form. And by far and away, the form of junk is the absolute best form for an American to own. It's the smallest denomination. It can't be counterfeited. It's readily recognizable. And it's U.S. mint lineage. I mean, junk is the absolute best form for an American to own. And I don't know if I'm the largest broker in the country with junk silver on the books, but I'm definitely one of the 10 largest brokers in the country as far as getting junk silver in customers' hands. Because that's really all I've done since, I'm going to say 2017. And other than IRA accounts where you've got to do something that's 99.9, in which case I've done silver. Have I done a few bars or generics because, people are jumping up and down. No, I don't want junk. I want the crappy bars. I want the crappy generics. Those are not going to trade. You will not be able to barter with a generic coin or a bar when this thing goes down, because the other side of the transaction is going to look at it and say, how do I know this is real? Because they're easily counterfeitable. Junk, you cannot counterfeit. If you had a counterfeit dime or a quarter, brand new, they'd be shiny. And if somebody wants to give you a shiny 1937 dime, run away from it, because there's no way in hell that that's a real dime or quarter or whatever. It has to show wear.
Any thoughts from you on the safety of precious metals in a vault or depository in a system down scenario?
Well, the safest place is in your own hands. And I tell people all the time, as far as your gold is concerned, get your gold delivered to you and hide it somewhere. I mean, there's not too many people that are going to be able to buy more than, say, 2,000 or 3,000 ounces of gold. That's hideable. You can bury that. You could put it in your attic, put it in your basement, put it under, inside a potted plant. But once you're talking about silver, if you're talking about bigger money, even $500,000, trying to store $500,000 worth of silver, that's hard. You should definitely have junk silver on hand. I tell people they should have a minimum 1 bag per person in your household. But when you're talking bigger money, storage is an issue. Myself personally, I store in North Dakota. One reason I store, and there's two vaults that I use up there. One reason is that North Dakota has their own banking system. They're not part of the Federal Reserve System. So theoretically, you could never have a federal agent walk in and say, tell us who your customers are. And I'm probably talking out of school here, and I won't mention the company name or whatever, but the big storage companies that their names, those are easy targets. The government would only have to go to their headquarters and say, tell us who all your customers are and throw your doors open because we're confiscating everything. So I would look for, if you're going to store, I would look for a private non-bank vault that is not publicly traded, does not have a headquarters that the feds could go to and say, you've got 15, 20 different locations. Tell us who your customers are.
We've got a related question here from people who are wondering about safety of their deposits or shares that they own of exchange-traded funds with precious metals under them, supposedly like SLV. D. Monty says, I have a large stake in SLV ETF. Should I keep it or sell, in your opinion?
Well, first off, SLV and GLD, in my opinion, are the poorest ETFs to own. If you read the prospectus, they do not have to own physical metal. They can own 100% paper contracts and say they own X amount of ounces, but they don't have one single physical ounce. So no, I'm not a fan of either of those. And no, you cannot get certificates for those. In my opinion, I think you're way better off liquidating those, buying physical metal, having, if it's gold, having it delivered to you. If it's silver, have a good chunk of it delivered to you. And if it's in such amount that you'd have to store, then store it. I think that's safer than having something that says it's gold, says it's silver, but can be contracts, because contracts are made to be broken. And when this thing goes down, people are going to find out that they don't own gold, they don't own silver.
We interview Andy regularly on our channel, and he made a comment on our channel. I think he's made it on other channels as well. And there's a question about that from Brian Sumption, who says, Andy Schectman recently said that economic conditions are getting to the point where he could see one or more billionaires waking up, calling up, and buying out the remaining inventory of Miles Franklin and other dealers. What would you do, Bill, to redeploy that money received in exchange for the metals inventory?
I'm not sure I understand the question. I absolutely agree that there's a ton of billionaires out there now that could literally, we saw when I did that order 2 years ago in July, and that was only $50 million, and it crippled the silver eagle, the junk, the numismatic market. Those markets were crippled for at least 60 to 90 days. There was zero supply. We went and we bought eagles that were 2 months into the future. So that wiped it out, and it was only $50 million. What if it's 500 million? What if it's 5 billion? $5 billion would blow up the entire global financial system, because there would be no gold, no silver of any form anywhere to be found. Again, I'm not really sure. Give me the question again.
Yeah. No, it gets confusing, because a lot of viewers have this idea that dealers have a stockpile of metals, and then they're going to give up their whole stockpile of metals and get a big stockpile of dollars in in exchange. And that is part of a transaction. But then what does the dealer going to do with that currency if they can't restock, if they can't replenish their inventory? That's just a fair question, I guess, for anyone, is what are you going to do with your currency when the metals are no longer available to be had at the current price? And maybe that's part of the answer.
If I owned the company, this would be my mindset. Okay. First off, dealers don't carry a huge inventory. They do carry some inventory, but for very large orders, they've got to go directly to their wholesalers. Now, if somebody came to me, and let's say I had, I pick a number, $500 million of inventory, and somebody came to me with $1 billion order. So I knew I couldn't process the order because I don't have it. I would have to go to wholesalers. Now, here's the twist, and I hope I explained this correctly. What I would do is I would not release my 500 million of inventory until I was able to secure $1 billion of inventory outside. Or let's say not $1 billion, but I would fill 500 million through wholesalers, and then I would want to know that there's enough metal for me to buy from the commission that I earned from the 500 million and the capital that I'm going to get back. I mean, obviously some of that's going to be borrowed, but some of it's going to be your own equity. So whatever's your own equity, I would want to make sure that I can secure that metal for me before I clear the whole trade. Because I don't want to sit with dollars. I don't want to sit with yen, euros, pounds, whatever. So I hope that was clear.
Yeah, this gets back to the whole end game of I think you're onto it, is that this game of musical chairs that is going to come to an end when the music stops, and you're already you're clear-headed enough to know that you want to be sitting on real assets when the music stops, and you don't want to have promissory notes, IOUs from somebody. So you want to make sure that you're able to replenish your physical assets before releasing those that are already in your possession. And I think we should all be thinking along those lines in terms of not giving up our tangible assets in times of increased risk without knowing for sure where we're going to be able to replenish those from.
Yeah, and understand that $1 billion order, a one-off $1 billion order, that's going to get around. It's going to light a fire. So there's going to be a stampede, and that would be your clue that the music has already stopped or it's stopping within the next 24, 48, 72 hours. So you're at that point, when you get an order like that, you're in cover your ass mode.
I'm remembering physical record players, and those of us in the audience who are of the age will remember that. I'm as the music is stopping, I'm imagining from what you're describing the sound of the needle scratching across record. That's the music is stopping right now. Yeah, and in that kind of a scenario, I think this is a mind experiment that is worth thinking through and talking through, because it forces people to come to grips with the fact that we've become so accustomed to IOUs, to credit, to debt. You've talked with us about that time and time again, is that the whole system runs on credit. The whole system runs on debt. The whole system runs on IOUs. And if you say, somebody says, oh, I'm comfortably retired, you go, really? Show me what part of your retirement is not based on IOUs from some other organization. And can you want to hit on that one more time before we wrap, and then we're going to give people a chance to know where they can find out your work?
Yeah, I would just say understand, and I typically use a loaf of bread as an example. There's a dozen or more uses of credit between the farmer when he's planting the seed to that final loaf of bread. I mean, the farmer's going to borrow money for fertilizer. He's going to borrow for seed, borrow for diesel. He's got to harvest. Then it's got to get trucked, and truckers use credit. It's got to get trucked to a silo. Then it's got to get, and obviously the silo is paying customers out probably not out of their pocket. They're using credit. Then it's got to get shipped to whatever processing center. The processing center, the truck uses credit to get it there. The processing center uses credit. And then they bake the loaf of bread and they ship it to the grocery store. The grocery store is buying stuff on credit, probably 30 or 60-day credit. So the whole way along, there's credit being used. If the credit is not available in any of those functions, the loaf of bread never arrives to the store. And that's the entire system. Everything you do, whether you turn the lights on, you turn your TV on, you get in your truck, and you want to go get gasoline, everything I just talked about, there's a use of credit for those to function. And when credit breaks, everything will stop. Your entire way of life, our world as we know it, will completely stop without credit. And credit is based on confidence. And with what's coming and what's going to happen with, derivative contracts in the, couple quadrillion breaking, there's not going to be anything left standing except for gold and silver as money. There will be no money other than gold or silver that has not bankrupted, because that's the problem with fiat currencies. They're credit based, and when credit fails, so will the fiat currencies.
That's something that I think is absolutely necessary for all of us who are preparedness minded to come to grips with and to just understand. And I think Warren Buffett said it well. He says, when the tide goes out, you get to find out who is swimming without trunks on. It's like it's like using X-ray specs, and suddenly you're seeing everything is empty, everything is invisible, everything is transparent except for the real things. And that's all that's going to be remaining is those real things that have lasting value. Everything else is going to come down like a house of cards. Any further thoughts on that before we and then tell us how people can find your work?
And when this does happen, you will have whatever you have. You will be wherever you are. Your situation will be what your situation is. You're not going to have the ability to change it, alter it. You won't be able to move out of a city to rural. You're not going to be able to create, cans of baked beans in your storage. You're not going to be able to create a generator or solar system or whatever for electricity. Whatever it is you have right now, that's all you're going to have until the system starts to reboot. And I would just say, even though they're lying bastards, the WEF and that whole cabal, they do tell you the truth. They want to depopulate this planet, and they want to see a mass die-off. And a mass die-off, all you have to do is cut electricity. You don't have to cut anything else. You cut electricity and there will be a mass die-off. But you're cutting electricity, you're cutting food, you're cutting gasoline, you're cutting healthcare, you're cutting meds. And speaking of meds, can you imagine what the world's going to look like when all these, wackos that take Zoloft and Zantac and whatever, all of a sudden don't have their meds? Can you imagine the zombie apocalypse that's going to happen with just the whatever they call it, psychoanalytic drugs or whatever? When those are not available, you're going to have the crazy people that have been kind of muted. They're going to be crazy. So it's going to be really ugly. And all I can say is do the best you can. And you know what the best you can do is. So, if you're faking it, you're faking, to yourself. Just do the best you can. You, I, everyone will definitely forget something, many things, a whole bunch of things, but don't beat yourself up as long as you did the best you can to prepare.
We recently went through our pantry and found tons of stuff that we thought was going to be longer dated than it was, even emergency food buckets and that sort of thing. There's a big difference between ones that are dated 5 years and ones that are dated 20 or 30 years. So be careful when you're stocking up, and rotate your stuff. And batteries that are nearing out of date, because we did this big stock up, a decade ago, and now a lot of things are nearing end of life that need to be replenished. So we're starting that process as well. If people want to follow your work on a regular basis, Bill, where should they get connected?
You can go to my website, billholter.com. I've really not promoted it other than just saying, go to billholter.com. But I would suggest that you subscribe. It's free, doesn't cost you anything. And whenever anything is posted, and it generally gets posted once a day, you'll get an email, 4 or 5 articles that I think are of interest with my comments to them. You'll be alerted if there's any interviews that I've done. They all get posted on my site. So this interview is the first time I ever suggested to people actually subscribe, because it's an easy way, you get spoon-fed the information. There is a contact button. If you want to contact me, you can click on that on my website, or you can go directly to my business email. It's bholter@proton.me.
Well, Bill, as always, thanks for joining us on Liberty and Finance. We get such positive reviews, and I didn't mention when all those questions were submitted, there were a lot of things that weren't questions. They were just thanks to you for being a voice of sanity in crazy times. So just on behalf of all of our viewers, we're grateful for your presence here, and hope to see you back soon.
Thank you, Dunnigan. My pleasure.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for August 13th through August 19th, 2024, while supplies last. First, we feature the famous 1-ounce gold Krugerrand at just $60 over spot. Next, we have the favorite bullion coin of Europe, backdated silver Philharmonics at just $3.10 over spot. And finally, we have 1-ounce platinum Canadian maples at only $80 over spot, one of the lowest premiums on platinum we've seen in a long time. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.